Snow drifted down from a sky the color of iron, quiet at first, almost gentle. By late afternoon it had thickened into a steady curtain, softening the sharp edges of the frontier town and muting the usual sounds of wagons and boots. Doors shut early, lanterns flickered behind frosted windows. Winter had a way of pressing people indoors, drawing lines between those who had warmth waiting and those who did not. Clara stood in the middle of that divide. Her shawl was too thin for the season, its faded fabric stiff with cold. Snow clung to her dark hair and melted slowly against her temples before freezing again. She shifted her weight from one aching foot to the other, trying to keep feeling in her toes. Her stomach had been empty since yesterday morning, but hunger had dulled into something quieter now, a hollow companion she had grown used to. The general store door opened with a jangle of bells, releasing a wave of warmth and the scent of coffee. A pair of men stepped out, laughing about something trivial, their cheeks flushed from the stove inside. Clara straightened immediately, swallowing her pride. "Sir," she called gently, her voice careful not to sound desperate, though desperation clawed at her ribs. "I'm looking for work. I can cook, mend, clean. I learn quickly." The laughter faded. One man avoided her eyes entirely. The other hesitated just long enough to show discomfort before shaking his head. "Winter's tight," he muttered. "Can't take on extra help." Then they stepped around her as if she were part of the falling snow. Clara lowered her gaze but did not step away. The wind picked up, sliding down the street in a sharp gust that tugged at her shawl and stung her cheeks raw. She hugged her arms around herself and moved closer to the storefront for shelter. Through the window she could see families stocking up on flour and sugar, children clutching peppermint sticks, women counting coins carefully but confidently. She remembered when she had once stood on the other side of glass like that, when her father's small farm had still produced enough to trade, when her mother's laughter filled their kitchen. That life felt like a story told about someone else now. The farm had failed after 2 merciless seasons. Illness had taken her mother before spring returned. Her father had followed before autumn. Debts had swallowed what little remained. Now there was only her. Another wagon rolled by, wheels crunching over fresh snow. Clara stepped forward again, lifting her chin despite the tremble in her jaw. "Please," she tried once more, addressing the driver. "I won't be trouble. I'll work for food." The driver barely slowed. "Try the next town," he called over his shoulder, already moving on. The next town was 30 miles away. Snow gathered at her boots, creeping over worn leather that no longer kept moisture out. Her fingers had gone numb despite rubbing them together. Still, she refused to sit. Sitting meant surrender. It meant letting the cold win. Across the street, beneath the overhang of the saloon, a tall figure stood watching. She felt his gaze before she saw him, a steady, assessing presence unlike the others. Not dismissive, not mocking, just watching. Clara lifted her eyes slowly. Their gazes met across the white blurred street. And for the first time that day, someone did not look away. Thomas crossed the street slowly, boots crunching against fresh snow, his long coat brushing against his legs with each steady step. Clara watched him approach, unsure whether to brace herself for another refusal or gather the last scraps of dignity she had left. He didn't look like the others. There was no hurried avoidance in his eyes, no irritation at being asked for help. His gaze was direct, thoughtful, almost measuring. He stopped a few feet in front of her, tall enough that she had to tilt her chin slightly to meet his eyes. Up close, she could see the weather carved into his face, sun lines, windburn, the roughness of a man who worked outdoors more than he spoke indoors. Yet there was something restrained about him, a quiet steadiness that didn't feel threatening. "You looking for ranch work?" he asked, voice low but clear over the wind. Clara nodded quickly, hope flaring before she could temper it. "Yes, sir. I can cook for hands, clean, mend clothes. I've worked livestock before. I'll do whatever's needed." He studied her gloved hands, thin and trembling despite her effort to hide it. His eyes moved to her boots, then back to her face. She forced herself not to shrink under the scrutiny. "I don't need a hand," he said at last. The words struck like a door closing. Clara swallowed hard and gave a small nod, already stepping back. "I understand," she murmured. She had practiced that phrase so often it came easily now, smooth as polished stone. Pride kept her voice steady even as something inside her sank. Thomas didn't move away. "What I need," he continued after a moment, "is a wife more than a hand." The wind seemed to pause. Clara blinked, unsure she had heard correctly. "A wife." The word felt enormous, almost absurd in the middle of a snow-covered street. "I've got land," he said plainly. 200 acres west of here. Cattle enough to keep a man busy sunup to sundown. A house that's quiet in ways I'm tired of." He shifted his weight slightly, as if uncomfortable revealing that much. "Winter's long. Work's heavy. I won't dress it up prettier than it is." She searched his face for humor, for cruelty, for some sign that he was mocking her situation. She found none, only honesty, blunt and unvarnished. "You don't even know me," she said carefully. "True," he replied, "but I know what hard times look like. And I know I'd rather share mine than keep standing alone in them." Her heart pounded, not from cold this time but from the sheer weight of the choice forming in front of her. Marriage on the frontier wasn't built on courtship and dances. It was built on survival, partnership, endurance. She had seen unions born of necessity last longer than those born of romance. "What would you expect?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "A partner," he answered without hesitation. "Someone who works beside me, eats at the same table, makes decisions with me, not someone I command." She felt something shift in her chest at that, an unexpected flicker of respect. "And if I say no?" He nodded once. "Then I'll wish you luck and mean it." Snow gathered on his shoulders as he extended his gloved hand, not demanding, simply offering. Clara looked at it for a long moment. Behind her lay uncertainty, hunger, another freezing night. Before her stood risk, but also warmth, stability, a chance at belonging. Slowly, with breath trembling in the cold air, she placed her hand in his. The ride west was quiet at first, the wagon wheels creaking against the frozen road as snow continued to fall in softer, steadier flakes. Clara sat beside Thomas on the wooden bench, her small bundle of belongings resting at her feet. The town slowly disappeared behind them, its rooftops fading into the pale horizon until it was nothing more than a blur of smoke and memory. She kept her hands folded in her lap, aware of the weight of what she had agreed to. Marriage, to a man she had known less than an hour. The word felt both frightening and strangely grounding. Out here, promises were made with fewer frills and more intention. Still, doubt whispered at the edges of her mind. Thomas guided the horses with steady hands, his posture relaxed but attentive. After several minutes, he cleared his throat. "There's a preacher who rides through every few weeks," he said. "He's due tomorrow or the next day. We can make it proper." Clara nodded, appreciating that he had thought of it. "Proper would be good," she replied softly. The ranch came into view just before dusk, a modest house of weathered wood, a barn standing solid against the wind, smoke curling from the chimney. It wasn't grand, but it was sturdy. Built with intention, built to last. Thomas helped her down from the wagon, his grip firm but respectful. "It's not fancy," he said. "But it's warm, warm." The word alone eased something inside her. When they stepped through the front door, he'd wrapped around her like an embrace. The interior was simple. Rough table, iron stove, a shelf of neatly stacked tin plates, but everything was clean and cared for. This wasn't a lonely man's neglect. It was a lonely man's order. "I'll take the barn tonight," Thomas said after setting her bundle near the hearth. "You can have the bedroom." She looked at him, surprised. "You don't have to." "I do," he said gently. "Until vows are spoken, respect again." Quiet and unwavering. That night, Clara lay in a bed that felt softer than anything she'd touched in months. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind brush against the walls. Fear still lingered, but it was no longer the sharp fear of hunger or cold. It was the uncertain tremble of stepping into a new life. The next afternoon, the preacher arrived as promised, snow dusting his shoulders as he stepped inside. The ceremony was simple, just the three of them standing near the fire. No flowers, no music, only spoken vows and steady eye contact. Thomas's voice did not waver when he promised to provide, to protect, to stand beside her. Clara's hands trembled slightly when she promised to build a home with him, to work with him, to remain when seasons turned harsh. When the preacher declared them husband and wife, silence filled the room for a heartbeat, then Thomas let out a slow breath, as if releasing years of solitude in one exhale. After the preacher left, they stood awkwardly for a moment, two strangers bound by something larger than either of them. "Well," Thomas said quietly, rubbing the back of his neck, "I reckon we start with supper." Clara found herself smiling, small at first, then real. "I reckon we do." As she moved toward the stove, the house no longer felt like a shelter borrowed from circumstance. It felt like the beginning of something built deliberately, two people choosing not just survival, but partnership. Outside, Snow continued to fall over the ranch, covering the past in white. Inside, warmth settled deeper into the walls. And for the first time in a long while, Clara did not feel alone.